I'm going to tell you the truth today, and it's scary. This is the truth. I'm John Gordon. I've been doing this broadcast now for almost 2 years, both on the radio and live streamed across the web. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm issuing an urgent warning. I have lived through my dad was in World War II, and I heard his stories. And I was born in the 50s, and I came into the world just on the heels of the Korean War. I was a teenager during the Vietnam War, and if I'd been born about 5 years earlier, I likely would have been drafted and had to go to Vietnam. I've lived through 9/11, the war with Iraq, the war with Afghanistan, the current war that is being waged in the Middle East. And of course, we are all watching the war between Ukraine and Russia. We are also keenly aware of China's aggression around the world and its stated objective to take the world over, to be the dominant force in the world by 2049. Ladies and gentlemen, it's later than you think. Now, on Saturday, I said on our broadcast that I was concerned about statements that President Biden made in reference to Vladimir Putin and Russia. I also said that I thought they were the most irresponsible comments that I have ever heard a leader utter in my lifetime. Oh, by the way, I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis, I hasten to add, which I think was the scariest time in post-World War II American history. But I want to, for those of you who didn't see it, I want to run the clip of Joe Biden having an interview with David Muir of ABC just last week in Normandy. Here's the clip.
I know for years you resisted the idea of American weapons being used for any sort of direct strike inside Russia. But we did witness this shift in recent days, authorizing American weapons for limited direct strikes. Are American weapons being used right now inside Russia?
They're authorized to be used in proximity to the border when they're being used on the other side of the border to attack specific targets in Ukraine. We're not authorizing strikes 200 miles into Russia. We're not authorizing strikes on Moscow, on the Kremlin.
Let me ask you about what Vladimir Putin said last night about this authorization of American weapons inside Russia. He said the supply of high-precision weapons to Ukraine for strikes on Russian territory is direct participation in this war. He went on to say that this is the way to serious problems, and again talked about Russia's nuclear capabilities. Does that concern you?
I've known him for over 40 years. He's concerned me for 40 years. He's not a decent man, he's a dictator, and he's struggling to make sure he holds this country together while still keeping this assault going. We're not talking about giving them weapons to strike Moscow, to strike the Kremlin, to strike just across the border where they're receiving significant fire from conventional weapons used by the Russians to go into Ukraine to kill the Ukrainians.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States does not utter a word without it being reviewed by dozens, if not hundreds of people. This statement would have been reviewed by people in the State Department, CIA, Defense Department, and of course, the executive branch. I do not believe that these comments were some off-the-cuff remark. And every single word would have been scrutinized and precisely worded and edited before uttered. The way that I interpret this is that we are going to give permission to the Ukraine, or whoever is actually conducting the war on the ground in the Ukraine, to use U.S.-made weapons to attack Russia inside the boundaries of Russia. Now, Biden's lame answer, or his lame words, were, we're not going to attack Moscow and go into the interior of the country. We're just going to attack along its border, but inside the border. I couldn't believe it. I sat there stunned, and I'm still stunned. And I said on Saturday, I felt that this was absolutely irresponsible and could lead us and take us to the brink of a nuclear war. Folks, there are 9 countries in the world that possess nuclear weapons. On our side, they include the United States, France, the United Kingdom, Israel, and then I don't know where to put India and Pakistan. I'm going to put them in the middle somewhere. Neutral, they should be on our side, but I'm not for sure. On the other side are Russia, China, and we believe North Korea now possesses some level of nuclear threat. There are 12,000 nuclear warheads. 3% of these 12,000 are adequate to wipe out 3 billion people on Earth. These 9 countries and the 9 leaders that govern them have the ability to destroy civilization, to wipe out humanity for all time. These words uttered by Joe Biden are reckless, they are scary, but I believe they are made very intentionally. I warned then and I warn now that Vladimir Putin and our enemies are not going to take these words lightly. So what happened? What has the result been now as we record this podcast and Saturday's radio show, just 5 days after I issued the warning? Look for yourself. Here's what showed up in Cuba yesterday.
Including a nuclear-powered submarine and a warship. This comes as tensions are soaring between the United States and Russia over the war in Ukraine, but the Pentagon, so far, downplaying the ship's arrival, saying the U.S. has been monitoring this all along.
4 Navy warships and a nuclear submarine have been detected in Cuba, 90 miles south of where I sit at this very moment. Do you really think, Mr. Biden, that Vladimir Putin is going to sit by idly and hear you say that you're going to fire weapons into his country, or that you're going to allow American-made weapons to be fired inside the boundaries, the sovereignty of Russia, and that there will be no response? Well, we can see that there is a response. Not since the Cuban Missile Crisis have I feared for our country like I do today. We also know that there are thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, of Chinese military-age fit men who are now inside the United States. We also know that there are people from terrorist organizations inside the United States. We know that Christopher Wray says that he expects a terrorist attack on the United States. Will it be coupled with a military attack from our adversaries? It looks to me that we are marching in that direction. And frankly, I am fearful for our country and our safety. What could be possessing these people? That's the question I ask myself. Do we really believe that people within our own Department of Defense and State Department and CIA and executive offices and the leadership in Congress are ignorant people? Do we really believe that they do not understand the consequences of Joe Biden's comments made in that ABC interview? Are we now seeing exactly what I predicted would happen mere days after the prediction was made? Well, if you heard the broadcast on Saturday or you've watched the podcast, you also know that I said that I suspect, without proof, that not only is it intentional, but it is part of a long game that they are playing. The Democrats, Pelosi, Schiff, Nadler, Obama, O'Biden, and O'Clinton have failed at everything that they have tried to do to bring down Donald Trump. They are out of weapons to go after him politically. They have tried 2 impeachments. They have tried 4 lawsuits and prosecutions. All of them have fallen apart. What could be possessing them? Here is my fear. Here is my suspicion. Is it possible that these people are so hungry for power and so reckless in their pursuit of power that they would bring this country into a confrontation with our adversaries who have enough nuclear weapons to destroy humanity for all times? Is it possible they could be so reckless? Is it possible they could be so inept that they would bring us to the brink of a world war, all in the name of retaining their power? Because what I think may happen is if we get into a full-out confrontation with Russia that leads to a world war, the Democrats will suspend the November elections and declare a state of emergency and retain their power for as long as they can get away with it. That is my fear. Now, it's outlandish. I understand. But I'm looking at all of the things that are going on around us, and I'm considering what could possibly be gained by this. I'm not sure that I am in favor of the war that's being waged in the Ukraine. I don't think that if Donald Trump was president today, that we would be at the brink of war with the second largest nuclear warhead owners, i.e. Russia. But it's not just Russia. You know, they work in concert with China. So I fear that we are at the brink. And I hope against hope that the adults will show up and that whatever provocation Joe Biden contemplated, that he will immediately retreat. I pray that Russia will withdraw their warships from Cuba. And I pray that the American people will not sit idly by and waiting for someone else to decide our fate. The consequences of what are happening could be devastating. It could be devastating for you and me, for our children and our grandchildren, and the future of our country. I have no confidence in the current leadership of this country to do the right thing, to use wisdom. It is either reckless political bluster or it is recklessness at the highest levels of our government. So what can we do? Well, I told you we can be prepared, and I also think that we need to avoid. So here's what I'm asking you to do. I want you to take 10 minutes, and I want you to write your representatives and tell them that you are concerned about the recent provocation against Russia and that the leadership of this country need to redirect our thinking. I encourage you to write letters to the editor of your local paper, and I invite you to call Talk Radio and express your concern. I hope I'm wrong. I absolutely hope that I am dead wrong about what I'm seeing. But you cannot deny the fact that Joe Biden did sit with that for that interview. He did say that he was going to authorize the use of U.S. weapons against Russia within its borders. And we do have 4 warships and a nuclear submarine in Cuba. Those are facts. Now, what conclusions and inferences do you draw? I'll leave that to you. But I've told you the truth today, and I hope that my conclusions are wrong. But I think we have to stay vigilant, we have to stay engaged, and we have to let our leaders know that there are limits to which we are willing to put up with their recklessness.